Kill Chain is one of the 6 films that Nicolas Cage made in 2019. Nick's role comes later in the film, but he's still the central figure in the plot, which revolves around 3 separate but intertwined stories. Director Ken Sanzel has had a long career in Hollywood, having written The Replacement Killers and served as an executive producer on the CBS show Numbers, with him navigating the waters of video on demand. Director Ken Sanzel.
So in 2015, I shot a movie in Bogota called Blunt Force Trauma, and had a great time. And when I came back, the producers, Gary Preisler and Eric Brenner, we kind of took a look at what we'd done, and I think we might have been the second American indie film to go in there, at least in the current incarnation of things. And so Gary said, it's a waste to know as much as we do about shooting in Bogota, which we'd sort of grabbed our ass and gone in without knowing much, and used an all Colombian crew and cast most of it in Colombia except for the stars. He said, it makes sense to go back because now we know more and we could do more. And so I had this idea for a script. We had scouted a hotel that we ended up not using in Candelaria, which is sort of the older part of downtown Bogota. Some really beautiful architecture, and so I had the idea of doing a movie that was a little less sprawling than the one I'd just done, because Blunt Force Trauma, I think we shot 18 locations in 24 days on a very small budget, and it was hard. And so I thought, well, let's make it easier. This is a big, beautiful hotel, and maybe I can do something. My initial idea was to write 3 stories set in this hotel, 3 noir stories, and then intercut them. Shoot each one individually and then intercut them all. And it was kind of a loose idea. And 2 of the stories ended up being what's kind of Nick's story, in terms of Anabelle coming in and putting the money down, and these killers who are there, and we don't know who they're there for initially. It was a different version of the same story initially, and then the sniper dad's story, and then there was a 3rd story that I started about these drug dealers, and it was just fucking awful. Am I allowed to swear? I don't even. It was just terrible. And so I told Gary I haven't cracked it. I don't know what to do with it, and I moved on for all of a week or 2, and then I don't know what happened. I had this thought about Slacker, the Richard Linklater movie, and it's, I always loved the structure, that sort of handoff, where each story, disappeared into the next story, and so I had the idea of taking the 2 stories I liked and doing some kind of a Slacker thing with it, and that's sort of how the cop story came about. The Ryan Kwanten and Eddie Sanchez in the back seat of the cop car. And once I wrote that and sort of laid it in, doing the idea of the handoff that Eddie kills Enrico Colantoni, and then he gets killed by the cop, and then I brought it back to the hotel. By bringing it back in this circle, even though you don't know it's a circle till the end, it reinformed what I was doing with that initial story, the bigger story, between Nick and Anabelle. So then that resolved as a thing that ended up turning into, what Nick and I called the Araña, the 11-page Nick near monologue about what the whole movie's been about. Before we got Nick, though, Gary did say, if we're going after a big star for the John part, he's going to wonder why he doesn't show up until page 45. And so I created that prologue, which is a total swipe of the beginning of The Killers. The Hemingway story, and especially the 40s movie version of it, where it's the 2 killers walking into the restaurant and kind of fucking with the guys. And so I did my riff on that. There's the 2 killers walking in. It does feel like, okay, let me tell you a story. So that was sort of, so that was how the script came about. and so I wrote the script and I gave it to Gary and Eric, and I think Eric had developed a relationship with Mike Nylon, Nick's manager, and we got it to him, and Nick liked the script, and really that made the movie happen. Nick's interest in doing it. What's funny is that I spoke with him several times over the phone, and we emailed back and forth, but I'm in New York, and he's all over the world, and making a lot of movies and living a lot of places, and so the first time I actually met him was in Bogota, and it was pretty interesting. We met in his hotel, and he had the script, and he said, "Hey, do you want to run lines with me?" I'm like, "Yeah, I can run lines with you. Why not?" And but they had, so to get back to the story of the hotel I wanted to shoot it in didn't work, and then there was another hotel I liked that didn't work, and the production designer, who had been my production designer on Blunt Force Trauma, knew about this place, Mappa Teatro, which had started out as a mansion, and then it had been a hotel, and then it had been a school, and was currently sort of an experimental theater. And we were able to rent it and sort of restore it back into a version of a hotel. And so, Hernan was working on it, and it was kind of under construction, but, the bar was up and parts of it were up. And I said, "You want to go, check it out? And if we're going to run lines, we can kind of, look at the space." And so, we went over to the hotel or to the set, and Nick proceeded to run the whole 45 pages, that he's in, off book. I mean, knew the script better than I knew the script, it was kind of dazzling and intimidating at the same time. And half the construction crew, the ones that could speak English, kind of stopped and listened to him, because he was already I'd probably say 60-70% of where he wanted to go, which was pretty freaking cool. You'd have to talk to Nick, but I think his process is sort of, he doesn't work on it until he finishes the movie that he's doing. And so my guess is he only had a week or two to actually, I mean, he'd read the script before, and then he was doing, I think he was doing Score to Settle before he came to us. And so, he had that in his head, and then once he got out of that, he jettisoned it and got deep into my script. And you could sort of tell just from the emails and stuff when he engaged, fully with Kill Chain. Well, it was kind of interesting because, initially we had conversations about the character, and we went, pretty deep into sort of the motivations and the, how they manifest in the scenes. And, obviously it's sort of a naughty story. And so, it was about, discussing what really happened and what he did and what he knew and when he knew it and what he's doing. Although he came pretty spring-loaded with most of it. Initially, we talked about Charles Bronson a lot, and when I talk about Charles Bronson, I'm talking about the kind of underrated great Charles Bronson, Rider on the Rain, Mr. Majestic, Once Upon a Time in the West, of course. Actually, we talked about a Bronson mustache, and and then I think when he saw how gorgeous Anabelle was, he decided he wanted to go with the beard because he felt like that kind of would hold better weight with her. And because she's stunning, and so he liked the beard. And then, but by the time we got to Bogota, there were I had turned him on to this movie, Hanny Calder, with Robert Culp, and then Hickey and Boggs with Robert Culp, and so we started talking about Robert Culp a lot, as this incredibly underrated actor, who did this kind of heightened stylized thing. The jacket was actually from our conversations about Robert Culp and I Spy, and then so we kind of went for he liked the idea of doing a windbreaker, but like kind of an elevated windbreaker look, and then we also talked about Kurosawa a lot, and he definitely was bringing Toshiro Mifune in towards the end. There was also, I'm blanking on the name, and I should have done my homework on this, but he sent me this one amazing samurai movie that wasn't a Toshiro Mifune movie, but it had a lot to do with that idea of at the end, the samurai telling a narrative that pulls together the threads of what revenge he set, and it was very much obviously relevant to Kill Chain. So we ended up drawing in some of that kind of classic '60s samurai movie influence into his performance as well. And then the glasses, again, that was about Araña. That was about creating that sense of him sort of hiding his nature underneath the glasses. And when the glasses come off, you start to get a glimpse of who he really is, the puppeteer. So yeah, he was very, those were conversations ahead of time, and then once we got there, kind of refining it. But he knows, he knows ahead of time. There are things with Nick that you just want to get on the ride. Why would you fight, the instincts of this guy who's not just a great actor, but iconic.
Bourbon and tequila and bourbon and beer.
Tequila and beer. Thought you were the clerk.
Clerk, bartender, security guard, owner.
Owner? What happened to Franco?
You know Franco?
No, I read the sign.
I won this place in a poker game.
Really?
It's a long game. And it turns out it's not worth that much.
We were doing this movie right after Mandy had started to, make noise, and obviously the producers were into the idea of that, that heightened Nick Cage performance, but that really wasn't what this character was. And so, Nick was playing the character, but then there were those moments that he would just sort of, pop those things in and out. And, it was about very much we discussed when he was John and when he was Araña, when he was the hotel owner, and when we were seeing the glimpses of the guy who's actually manipulating people, and the glasses, were part of that, part of that track too. So yeah, I think what was really fun with the performance is that it wasn't a all big all the time kind of performance, and so when he went to those high notes, you really felt them, and that one that you're talking about, where he pours the shot, it's like a little wink, but then, that scene, I think, turns back into this sort of minor chord between two sort of broken people playing with each other. And that was the other thing, is I thought, Anabelle was great, and he really, her first day in Bogota, he said, hey, let's go over to the theater, and the three of us ran the lines again, and she was initially sort of intimidated by the fact that he was already off book, but he was, he was really kind of easy with her, and, kind of, he likes to make a plan, he likes to know ahead of time what he's going to do when he gets there. My philosophy, and it had really evolved over Blunt Force Trauma, is I like to shoot everything on right angles. I like to shoot everyone who's in the scene all the time if possible. I'm running two cameras, and I feel like, and again, coming from TV, there's nothing more deadening than an actor having to act against someone who's standing on an apple box with flags and lights all around him. And so we kind of pre-light the location and then give the actors their leash and use handheld cameras to chase them around mostly, or two handhelds on dollies sometimes. So yeah, I told him, I don't shoot piecemeal. I like to shoot scenes. I like to shoot whole scenes. And at first I think he had a kind of oh fuck kind of feeling about it, but then he was all in. And what I noticed is that was one of the things we did a little bit later. We shot his stuff close to chronologically, and so I remember he was on a break, and I saw him downstairs walking through the whole aria, figuring out when he was going to light the match and when he was going to pour the drinks, and everything was freaking digital. It was precise. So with Nick, it was just a shit ton of fun watching him go at it. And so when the time came to shoot, I remember we shot him leading the killers in and kind of settling into the scene. We shot that, and my intention was to sort of stop there and then do the whole narrative as one thing. But he wanted to go kind of part of the way into the aria in the stuff that brings the killers into the bar. So we did that the day before we had planned to do the aria, and so then the aria kind of starts a little deeper into the scene, although we overlapped it too. But really, what we just did is we let the actors do it like a play, and we chased them. I'd swap lenses, I'd adjust, I'd make sure we were getting particular details. A lot of times, the operators, Manuel, the DP, was also the 8-camera operator, and they'd see something and they'd fight for their shots. And I'm a firm believer that I should be the least skilled person at every department, in the job, or else I've hired the wrong people. The original version of the script actually is even more egregious, which is it starts with Rico. It starts with the sniper, and then it goes from the sniper to to Sanchez, to the cop, from the cops to Erickson and Renata, and from Renata to Nick. And my first cut, I actually submitted it that way because I like the idea of a movie where you're actually following a narrative, and then all of a sudden, holy fuck, this woman walks into a hotel and there's Nick Cage. The producers, Gary, I think, looked at it and said, "Holy shit! It actually plays better that way, as a movie." But commercially, we were dealing with some sort of, nuts and bolts merchants, and they said, you got to have fucking Nick in the beginning, and that's actually why we do that extended credit sequence too. Was that I thought if we saw these shots of Nick that we know happen later in the movie, nobody's going to get confused that Nick doesn't come back in a substantive way. But I don't know. That was the narrative that it was, and the narrative was written before it was Nick. So really, I can't speak to sort of the commercial barometer of whether the movie suffers from Nick being away for a long time. I happen to love the other two, major set pieces. So it doesn't bother me. But I guess if you're just coming to see Nick Cage wage mayhem, you might get a little restless and impatient. And interestingly, we did a test screening in Pasadena, and nobody seemed to have a problem with it during the test screening. Nobody's comment was, I was waiting for Nick to come back. So, I think, there's that weird thing, of how it's promoted, and I was not thrilled with Cinetel and Amazon for doing a one sheet that's just a picture of Nick, because I think if it had felt more like, like the Running with the Devil one sheet, where, you get a feeling of it being an ensemble, that it would have managed people's understanding of what movie they were entering a little better. It was very frustrating, and Gary and Eric and I were very frustrated with the people that we got in business with, who ultimately banked the movie, and were bottom dollar people who didn't want to spend a nickel, and so they let Amazon do everything instead of us designing something. And the people who did the credit sequence, those people we wanted to bring in to do the posters and and the trailer, and I think it would have been a lot better if we'd been able to do that, because I think it I don't think it would have we're not selling something that isn't a Nick Cage movie, but I think if you sold it a little more broadly, you opened up the sense of what the movie is, then then people go into it a little more open to it's not going to be Nick just walking around killing one guy after another. And so that was that's you make a deal and you lose some of that control if nobody wants to spend the money to to do those things ahead of time. So there you go.
You have the eyes and the hands of a violent man. I know, because I know violent men. Does a violent man really think he's gonna find peace?
If you need anything,
You here all night?
I was going to say dial 00. Yes, I am.
Thought you were the clerk.
Clerk, bartender, security guard, owner.
How long you had this place?
About a year. A friend of mine left it to me.
Well, we hear you don't have any friends.
Not anymore.
I'm getting out of a difficult situation.
Because you're using someone else's money.
I don't see it that way.
But someone does.
Do you know who I am?
You are a type.
Are you a type too?
Yeah. The kind that doesn't want to get shot.
You've got a bad feeling about this. Get out.
I leave without knowing what's going on, then I don't know what's going on.
He doesn't trust you.
I can trust you, but you can't trust me.
Right.
You want to die.
I kind of don't like you.
You set this in motion.
You want me to say I'm sorry? I'm not the guy you think I am.
You don't want to be, but you are.
I assumed you had a gun in your purse.
I did. I just got to the knife first.
The great thing with Nick was he's just this total fucking pro. He's there to work and he's there to, get the shit done. A lot of evenings we'd be texting back and forth and he'd be sending me, clips of, interviews and movies and stuff like that. But there was no, kind of outsized mythical story. He just came in and, kicked the living shit out every day. And when you get stars of that level, that they're sort of conferring the power on you to direct the movie, and he never did do that. He always let me direct the movie, and I've been in situations with big actors where it's a struggle, and it wasn't that. He sincerely loved the material and committed to making the material happen. And then when you get into editing, what's interesting with him is that for all the things you knew you got on the day, you didn't know half of what you gotten on the day. The little detail work. One of the best moments I think in the movie is a small one, is when he says, to listen to all of this and never have gotten to the point, and he takes a drag on the cigarette, and the way his eyes move is just fucking hilarious and mischievous and so there all at the time. And I didn't see it on the day. On the day you're kind of getting your work done, and then you're sitting in in the room of truth, in editing, and you see that he's just left behind all of these details and all these choices for you. Actually, the one thing I will say is he would eat chicken every day, right? And yeah, you know what, that story's too complicated. It's not a good story. Forget it. Well, yeah, he does on set, and it was like, oh, that's kind of that's funny, but everyone got sick. The entire crew got this brutal stomach disease. I mean, people were puking and shitting. A couple people had to go home for a couple of days. I was sick through the whole shoot. Same as the other one. I think Bogota tries to kill me every time I go there, but I love it anyway. And he was the only one who didn't get sick, and he looked at me and said, "This is why you get a chicken on set." I guess there was the accident. There was the armorer fucked up and had an accidental discharge with one of the shotguns, and Nick took that in stride, which some actors would not have. But yeah, it wasn't that great a story. Nobody's hair blew off.